Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport shuttle and watched Kepler station grow larger in the darkness of space. A massive structure spun slowly against the backdrop of distant stars, its metal arms reaching out like the spokes of a giant wheel. Lights blinked across its surface in patterns that meant nothing to him, but probably made perfect sense to the alien pilots. His stomach twisted with nervousness. 3 months ago, Jake had been a regular college student studying military history at West Point. Now he was about to become the first human ever to attend the Galactic Defense Academy. The weight of representing his entire species pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy backpack. The shuttle docked with a soft thud that Jake felt through his boots. Around him, other students gathered their belongings. Most of them looked like nothing Jake had ever seen before. There was a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms, another that seemed to be made of living crystal, and something that looked like a cross between a lizard and a person. Jake grabbed his single duffel bag and followed the group through the airlock. The artificial gravity felt strange after the 0G of the shuttle. Everything around him hummed with alien technology. The walls curved in ways that hurt his eyes to look at, and the air smelled like ozone and something sweet he could not identify. Human. Student Jake Morrison, a voice said behind him. Jake turned to see a creature that stood about 7 feet tall. It had reptilian features with green and brown scales that seemed to shift color as it moved. Its eyes were large and golden, with pupils that looked like vertical slits. I am Zek Thar of the Valorian Republic. I have been assigned as your roommate. Jake had studied basic information about the major alien species during his preparation, but seeing one up close was different than reading about them. Zek Thar wore a uniform similar to Jake's, but modified for his different body shape. His hands ended in clawed fingers, and when he spoke, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. "Nice to meet you," Jake said, extending his hand. Zek Thar looked at the offered hand for a moment before carefully reaching out with one of his own. His grip was firm but careful, as if he was afraid he might hurt Jake. "Your species has an interesting greeting custom," Zek Thar said. "On my world, we show respect by displaying our throat scales." He tilted his head back slightly, revealing bright orange patches on his neck. Jake tried to copy the gesture awkwardly. "Like this?" "Close enough," Zek Thar said, and Jake thought he detected amusement in the alien's voice. "Come, I will show you to our quarters." They walked through corridors filled with students from a dozen different worlds. Jake noticed how the other aliens moved in small groups, usually with members of their own species. A few glanced at him with curiosity, but most seemed to ignore him completely. Their room was larger than Jake had expected, with 2 sleeping areas separated by a common space. Everything was designed to accommodate different body types and needs. Zek Thar's side of the room had a heat lamp and what looked like a sand pit. Jake's side looked more familiar, with a bed and desk that could have come from any human dormitory. "The Academy has been preparing for your arrival for several months," Zek Thar said, as Jake unpacked his few belongings. "Many of the instructors are curious about human capabilities. Others question whether your species is ready for advanced military training." Jake hung up his spare uniforms in the closet. "What do you think?" Zek Thar was quiet for a long moment. "Humans are from what the galaxy calls a death world. Your planet has weather that can kill, animals that hunt in packs, and natural disasters that destroy entire regions. Most of us come from worlds that are much safer. This makes many of my classmates nervous." "Nervous how?" "They think humans might be too aggressive, too unpredictable. Your species has only been part of galactic society for 5 years. Many wonder if you are ready to learn alongside us." Jake sat on his bed and looked at his roommate. "What do you think?" "I think anyone who survives on a world like Earth might have lessons to teach the rest of us. Zekthar's scales shifted to a brighter green. But you will need to prove yourself. The other students will be watching everything you do. Over the next few days, Jake began to understand what Zekhthar meant. In the dining hall, conversations stopped when he approached tables. Other students were polite, but distant. He could feel their eyes on him during lectures, studying his reactions to everything from basic physics to alien history. The classes themselves were challenging, but not impossible. Jake had always been good at learning, and the translation devices made communication easier than he had expected. What was harder was the constant feeling that he was being tested, not just by the instructors, but by every student he met. His first real conversation with other classmates happened during a break between tactical theory classes. Jake was sitting alone in the common area when a graceful figure approached his table. She looked almost human, but with pale blue skin and silver hair that seemed to move on its own. Her eyes were completely black, like looking into deep water at night. "I am Lyra Moonwhisper of the Celestian Collective," she said in a voice that somehow seemed to come from inside Jake's head as well as his ears. "May I join you?" "Sure," Jake said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Lyra sat down with fluid movements that reminded Jake of a dancer. "I have been curious about your species since the announcement of your enrollment. Celestians are telepathic, but when I try to sense your thoughts, I find only silence. It is unusual. You can read minds?" "Not exactly read. More like sensing the emotional patterns and surface thoughts of others. It helps us understand intentions and avoid conflicts. But with you, there is nothing. Like trying to hear music through a wall." Jake was not sure if he should be offended or relieved. "Is that a problem?" "It is different. Many of my people find it unsettling, but I think it might be an advantage. In combat situations, telepathic species can be confused by too much mental noise. Your silence might make you harder to predict." Before Jake could respond, a heavy thud announced the arrival of another student. Kron Steelhide was massive even by the standards of his insectoid species. His carapace was dark blue-black and looked thick enough to stop bullets. Multiple arms ending in sharp claws extended from his torso, and his compound eyes reflected the room's lights like tiny mirrors. "The human," Kron said in a voice that buzzed like a swarm of bees. "I have heard much discussion about your presence here." "Good things, I hope," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. Kron was intimidating, but Jake had learned not to show fear around predators during camping trips with his father. "Mixed things. Some say humans are too primitive for advanced training. Others say your species might be dangerous if not properly controlled. I am curious which is true." "Maybe neither," Jake said. "Maybe we're just different." Kron's head tilted in a way that suggested interest. "Different how?" Jake thought about how to explain. "Where I come from, we learned to survive alongside things that could kill us. Not by being stronger or faster, but by being smarter and more stubborn. We don't give up easily." "Persistence," Lyra said, the word forming in Jake's mind. "Yes, I have read about this human trait. You are one of the few species that hunts by simply refusing to stop chasing prey until it collapses from exhaustion." "That sounds terrifying," Kron admitted. "On my world, we fight until one side wins or retreats. The idea of pursuit that never ends is disturbing." Jake realized he might have said too much. "We don't hunt people, just animals for food." "But the principle remains," Lyra said. "You do not accept defeat as easily as other species might." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of an announcement over the Academy's communication system. "All second-year students report to Combat Training Bay 7. Repeat, all second-year students to Combat Training Bay 7. "That includes us," Zekhthar said, appearing at Jake's shoulder. Basic Combat Assessment. They will want to see what you can do. Jake followed his new friends through the corridors toward the training bay. Around them, other students moved with purpose and excitement. Jake noticed that some of the older students they passed gave them knowing looks, as if they remembered their own first combat assessments. Combat Training Bay 7 turned out to be a huge room with walls that could project different environments. When they entered, it was set to look like a rocky desert under an orange sky. The instructor waiting for them was Commander Veltar, a four-armed Nexari officer with skin like polished metal and eyes that glowed with internal light. "Welcome to your first practical assessment," Commander Veltar announced. "Today, we will evaluate your basic combat reflexes, physical capabilities, and tactical thinking. Each of you will face a series of challenges designed to test different aspects of military readiness." Jake's mouth went dry. He had trained in various martial arts and done well in physical fitness tests, but he had no idea how he would compare to alien students who might have natural advantages he could not imagine. "Student Morrison," Commander Veltar called. "As our newest arrival, you will demonstrate first." Jake stepped forward, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes watching his every move. Behind him, he heard Zeekthar whisper something that the translation device rendered as "show them what humans can do." 3 weeks had passed since Jake's arrival at the academy, and he was finally starting to feel like he belonged. His combat assessment had gone better than expected. While he was not the strongest or fastest student, his instructors noted that he adapted quickly to new situations and never gave up, even when facing opponents with clear physical advantages. The morning started like any other. Jake woke to the sound of Zekthar's alarm, a series of musical tones that reminded him of wind chimes. His roommate was already stretching on his heated sand pad, going through what looked like a complex series of movements that stretched every muscle in his scaled body. "Good morning," Jake said, swinging his feet out of bed. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," Zekthar replied, his scales shifting to a lighter green that Jake had learned meant contentment. "Though I had strange dreams about the hunting grounds of my homeworld. Perhaps it is a sign." Jake had learned not to dismiss Zekthar's comments about signs and omens. The Valorian culture put great importance on such things, and his roommate had been right about several small predictions over the past few weeks. They dressed in their academy uniforms and headed to the dining hall for breakfast. The routine had become familiar. Jake would get his human-compatible food from the special section, while Zekthar selected various meats and what looked like small rocks that he said were mineral supplements for his diet. Lyra joined them at their usual table, her silver hair floating around her shoulders as if she were underwater. Her breakfast consisted entirely of liquids in different colors, each one providing different nutrients her people needed. "Something feels different today," she said, her mental voice touching the edge of Jake's thoughts. Over the weeks, she had learned to communicate with him through gentle telepathic contact rather than trying to read his mind. There is tension in the minds of the instructors. Excitement mixed with concern. "About what?" Jake asked, taking a bite of something that was supposed to taste like eggs, but reminded him more of mushrooms. "I cannot tell. Their thoughts are disciplined, controlled, but the emotional undercurrent is strong." Kron arrived at their table with his usual heavy footsteps, carrying a tray loaded with what looked like various insects and plant matter. His compound eyes glittered as he settled his large frame onto the reinforced chair designed for his species. "The senior students are talking," he buzzed in his multi-toned voice. "Something about a special training exercise that happens rarely. They become quiet when underclassmen approach, but I have heard fragments." "What kind of fragments?" Zekthar asked, his scales darkening slightly. "Words like dangerous and survival rate and medical evacuation procedures." Kron's mandibles clicked together in what Jake had learned was a sign of nervousness. They speak of something that hunts. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In his weeks at the academy, the training had been challenging, but never truly dangerous. Safety protocols were strict, and medical facilities were always nearby. The idea that there might be exercises with actual survival rates suggested something far more serious. Their speculation was interrupted by an announcement that echoed through the dining hall. All second-year students report to main amphitheater immediately after morning meal. Attendance is mandatory. The four friends exchanged glances. Around them, other second-year students were having similar reactions, their various forms of body language all expressing the same mixture of curiosity and concern. "This is it," Lyra said, her mental voice tight with worry. Whatever the senior students were discussing, they finished their breakfast quickly and joined the stream of students heading toward the main amphitheater. The massive room could hold all of the academy's students at once, but today only the second years were present. Jake estimated about 200 students from dozens of different species, all sitting in the curved rows of seats that faced the central platform. Commander Veltar stood on the platform, her forearms clasped behind her back. Her metallic skin seemed duller than usual, and her glowing eyes appeared more focused and intense. Behind her, a large holographic display showed the Academy's seal, but Jake noticed technical equipment being set up by staff members. "Students?" Commander Veltar began, her voice carrying easily through the amphitheater. "Today I will inform you about a special training exercise that occurs once per academic cycle. This exercise is not required, but participation is strongly encouraged for those who wish to pursue advanced military careers." The room fell completely silent. Jake noticed that even the usual background noises from various species breathing, patterns and unconscious movements had stopped. "You will face a creature that represents one of the most significant challenges in known space," the commander continued. "Azira the Stalker." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several students made sounds that Jake's translation device could not convert, but he understood them as expressions of fear or shock. Zekthar's scales turned almost black, and Jake felt Lyra's mental presence recoil from his mind as if she had been struck. Kron's compound eyes dilated, and his carapace made small clicking sounds. "By the hive mind," he buzzed quietly. "They cannot be serious." Commander Veltar raised one of her hands for silence. The holographic display behind her changed to show a creature that made Jake's blood run cold. It stood about 8 feet tall on powerful legs that ended in clawed feet. Its body was lean but muscular, covered in skin that seemed to shift and change color like oil or water. Long arms ended in hands that had retractable bone blades instead of fingers, and its head was elongated with multiple eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. The Zirathi Stalker was bioengineered by the Zirathi Empire before their civilization collapsed 3,000 years ago. Commander Veltar explained. It was designed to be the perfect hunter, capable of tracking prey across multiple environments and terrains. It can alter its skin pigmentation for camouflage, move with complete silence, and phase partially out of normal space-time to avoid detection or barriers. Jake stared at the image, trying to process what he was seeing. The creature looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares, a combination of every predator that had ever stalked human ancestors in the darkness. The creature's intelligence is limited but focused entirely on hunting behavior, the commander continued. It can learn and adapt to prey responses, making it more dangerous the longer an encounter continues. It has been known to track targets for days without rest, using patience and persistence that exceeds most sentient species. "How do we fight it?" called out a student from one of the upper rows. "You do not fight it," Commander Veltar replied firmly. "The exercise is not about combat. It is about survival tactical thinking, and teamwork under extreme pressure. The Stalker is programmed not to kill, but to hunt. However, accidents can and do occur when dealing with a creature of this capability. The display changed again, showing statistics that made Jake's stomach clench. Injury rates, medical evacuation numbers, and a small but significant percentage marked as fatalities. Students who choose to participate will be divided into teams of 5. Commander Veltar explained. Each team will be placed in a specially designed habitat dome that simulates various planetary environments. The Stalker will hunt you for 6 hours. Success is measured by survival, demonstration of tactical thinking, effective team coordination, and creative problem-solving under extreme stress. A student near the front raised a tentacled appendage. Commander, what is the survival rate for this exercise? Approximately 85% of students complete the exercise without serious injury, Commander Veltar replied. 10% require medical intervention but recover fully. 4% sustain injuries that result in extended medical treatment. 1%. She did not finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Jake looked around at his friends. Zekthar's scales were still dark, his head tilted in the way that meant he was calculating odds and probabilities. Lyra had her eyes closed, probably trying to sense the emotional reactions of students around them. Kron's carapace had stopped making clicking sounds, which Jake had learned meant he was entering a defensive mental state. Why? Jake found himself asking, his voice carrying in the sudden silence that followed the commander's explanation. Why? Do this exercise at all? Commander Veltar's glowing eyes focused on him. Because, Student Morrison, military service in the galaxy requires facing creatures and situations that exceed normal parameters of safety and predictability. The Stalker exercise teaches lessons that cannot be learned in standard combat training. It shows you what you are truly capable of when everything comfortable and familiar is stripped away. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed images of the habitat domes where the exercise would take place. They looked like massive transparent spheres filled with different environments, dense forests, rocky deserts, ice fields, and swampy wetlands. The exercise will take place in 2 weeks, Commander Veltar announced. You have until then to form teams and decide whether to participate. Those who choose not to participate will receive alternative advanced training that will not count against their academic standing. However, this exercise is considered a significant indicator of potential for elite military service. The days following the announcement moved quickly, but Jake felt like he was watching everything through thick glass. His team had formed naturally around the core group of friends, with the addition of Nixa Swiftwind, a graceful creature from the Windrunner species who could move faster than Jake's eyes could follow, and whose hollow bones made her incredibly light. Nixa stood, about 6 feet tall with elongated limbs, and what looked like small wing membranes stretched between her arms and torso. Her people had evolved from aerial hunters, and she retained many of their predatory instincts. When she moved, it was with the fluid grace of something that had once soared through alien skies. I have studied the habitat dome layouts, she said. During their first official team meeting, spreading holographic maps across the table in the study room they had reserved. There are vertical elements in each environment that my people can use effectively. I can serve as scout and early warning system. Jake watched his teammates analyze the challenge ahead of them. Each brought their species' natural approach to survival situations, and their planning reflected millions of years of different evolutionary paths. Zekthar had filled 3 data tablets with calculations and probability matrices. His reptilian brain worked like a computer, processing vast amounts of information about the Stalker's recorded behavior patterns, hunting preferences, and reaction times. Based on archived footage from previous exercises, he said, his scales shifting to the pale green that meant intense concentration. The creature follows predictable probability, cascades in its hunting behavior. If we can stay within the statistical margins of safety for the first 4 hours, our survival chances increase dramatically. Lyra approached the problem from a completely different angle. She had been meditation for hours each day, trying to expand her telepathic range and sensitivity. During their planning sessions, she kept her eyes closed and described what she sensed from the mental exercises happening in other study rooms. Fear, she said, her mental voice touching Jake's thoughts. Like cold fingers. So much fear from the other teams. It creates a mental noise that might mask our presence if I can learn to use it properly. But the creature is not telepathic, so my usual advantages will be limited. Thresh Iron Quarry, their crystalline teammate, had joined them 2 days after. The announcement. His people were living mineral beings, and his natural armor made him nearly indestructible by normal standards. He had volunteered for their team specifically because he wanted to work with a human student. My carapace can absorb significant impact, he said in his voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. I can serve as mobile cover for the team and carry extra equipment without being slowed down. But I am not fast, and my footsteps are loud. I will need to be positioned carefully. Jake listened to his teammates' planning and realized they were all thinking defensively. Every strategy focused on hiding, running, or avoiding the Stalker. While these were logical approaches, something about them felt wrong to Jake. During his free time, Jake spent hours in the Academy's archives, studying everything available about the Stalker. He watched footage from previous exercises, read biological analyses, and examined the creature's hunting patterns. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that his teammates were missing something crucial. The Stalker was indeed a perfect predator, but it was perfect in specific ways. Its behavior patterns were sophisticated, but followed certain rules. It responded to movement, sound, and what the records called prey indicators. Students who ran triggered its chase instincts. Students who hid activated its searching behaviors. Students who showed fear seemed to attract its attention. More quickly, Jake found himself thinking about conversations with his father during hunting, trips back on Earth. His dad had been a park ranger before retirement, and he had taught Jake about predator behavior from a young age. Every predator has advantages and disadvantages, his father had said during a camping trip when Jake was 12. They had been discussing what to do if they encountered a mountain lion. The key is not to think like prey. Predators expect prey to run or hide. They do not expect competition. The idea had been growing in Jake's mind for days, but he had not shared it with his teammates because he knew they would think he was crazy. While they planned elaborate evasion strategies, Jake was considering something that went against every piece of advice the instructors had given them. A week before the exercise, Jake made a video call home. The time delay between Earth and Kepler station meant conversations were awkward, but he needed to talk to someone who understood his thinking. His sister Lisa appeared on the screen after several seconds of delay. She was in her field gear, probably taking a break from her wildlife research in Yellowstone. Behind her, Jake could see the familiar landscape of the American wilderness. "Hey, Space Cadet," she said with a grin. "How's life among the aliens?" Jake told her about the upcoming exercise, describing the Stalker and the challenge they faced. Lisa listened with the focused attention she gave to any discussion of predator behavior. "Sounds like a cross between a grizzly bear and a mountain lion," she said when Jake finished his description. "Intelligent, patient, and designed to hunt. What are your teammates planning?" "Hide and run mostly. Try to avoid it for 6 hours until the exercise ends." Lisa shook her head. "That will not work. You are thinking like prey animals. This thing was designed to hunt prey animals. It will be better at that game than you are. That is what I have." Been thinking, Jake said. Dad always said not to run from predators because it triggers their chase instincts. Exactly. You make yourself a harder target than it is worth, or you make it think you are another predator instead of prey. Have you told your teammates this? They would think I am insane. Their species all evolved as either prey animals or pack hunters. None of them come from a world where individual humans regularly faced down megafauna. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Considering, you know what you have to do, right? You cannot change millions of years of evolution in your teammates, but you can use your own evolution. After ending the call, Jake sat in his room thinking about what Lisa had said. Humans were persistence hunters. They had evolved to track prey across vast distances, never giving up, never stopping until their target collapsed from exhaustion. But they had also evolved to face down predators that were bigger, stronger, and faster than they were. Early humans had survived on a planet full of saber-toothed cats, cave bears, and pack hunters by being smarter, more stubborn, and more willing to fight back than their prey instincts suggested. They had learned to use tools, fire, and most importantly, aggressive behavior to convince predators that hunting humans was more trouble than it was worth. That night, Jake began modifying his equipment in ways that would horrify his teammates. Instead of focusing purely on detection and stealth gear, he prepared items that could be used offensively if necessary. He modified a plasma torch meant for emergency repairs, turning it into something that could create bright flashes and loud noises. He prepared rocks and debris that could be thrown accurately. He even practiced aggressive postures and threatening behaviors in front of his room's mirror. Zekthar noticed the changes in Jake's behavior during their final team meeting 3 days before the exercise. Your scent has changed, the reptilian sighed, his scales darkening with concern. You smell like a hunting predator instead of a prey animal. What are you planning, Jake? I am planning to survive, Jake said simply. But I need you all to trust me when the time comes. If we encounter the Stalker, let me try something before we run. What kind of something? Nixa asked, her large eyes. Reflecting concern, Jake thought about how to explain without sounding completely insane. My species evolved differently than yours. We learned to deal with predators not by being faster or stronger, but by being more stubborn and more willing to fight back. I want to try treating the Stalker like any other dangerous animal from Earth. Lyra's telepathic touch brushed against his mind, and he felt her surprise at the calm determination she found there. You are not afraid, she said wonderingly. You are excited. Jake realized she was right. As the exercise approached, he was not feeling the same dread that seemed to grip his teammates. Instead, he felt something that reminded him of the anticipation before a challenging hike or a difficult rock climb. It was nervous energy, but it was the kind that came from looking forward to testing himself against a worthy challenge. I am nervous, he admitted, but I am also curious. This creature is supposed to be the perfect predator, but it was designed to hunt prey animals. I want to see what happens when it meets something that refuses to be prey. Thresh's crystalline form resonated with a sound like wind chimes. This is either very brave or very foolish. On Earth, we have a saying, Jake replied. The difference between bravery and stupidity is whether or not it works. The final days before the exercise passed in a blur of last-minute preparations and increasingly nervous energy from his teammates. Jake continued his research and preparation, but he also spent time trying to calm his friends' fears. Other teams were making different choices. Some had dropped out entirely, choosing the alternative training rather than face the Stalker. Others had recruited the largest. The morning of the exercise arrived with artificial sunrise flooding through the Academy's transparent sections. Jake woke before his alarm, his body tense with anticipation. Across the room, Zekthar was already awake, his scales shifting through. Rapid color changes that indicated extreme nervousness. "Did you sleep?" Zekthar asked, his voice carrying more worry than Jake had ever heard from his usually calm roommate. "Some," Jake replied, stretching muscles that felt coiled like springs. "You?" "No. I spent the night running probability calculations. No matter how I adjust the variables, our statistical chances of avoiding injury remain below acceptable parameters." Jake sat up and looked at his friend. Zekthar's scales were cycling through dark colors, and his pupils were dilated with stress. "Math cannot solve everything, you know. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts." "Human instincts evolved on a death world," Zekthar replied. "Mine evolved on a world where intelligent planning was the difference between survival and becoming." Someone else's meal. They dressed in the special exercise gear that had been provided. The uniforms were lighter than their normal academy clothing, designed to allow maximum movement while providing basic protection. Jake noticed that his teammates' gear had been modified for their different body types, but the basic design was the same for everyone in the dining hall. Jake found the rest of his team already assembled at their usual table. The mood was somber, and Jake noticed that other teams were showing similar signs of tension. Some students were not eating at all, while others seemed to be consuming extra food as if preparing for a long journey. Lyra looked pale, her normally silver hair appearing almost white. Her black eyes seemed larger than usual, and Jake could feel the edge of her telepathic presence trembling with anxiety. "I have been sensing the mental state of the other students," she said, her voice reaching Jake's mind with obvious effort. "The fear is overwhelming. It creates a psychic noise that makes it difficult to think clearly." Nixa sat perfectly still, her elongated limbs folded in a way that reminded Jake of a bird preparing to take flight. Her large eyes darted constantly around the room, tracking every movement and sound. "My people have sayings about hunts like this," she said in her musical voice. "The wind that runs fastest often runs into the strongest tree, but the wind that knows when to be still can pass through any forest." Thresh had positioned himself at the end of the table where his crystalline bulk would not block the others. His mineral structure rang softly with harmonic tones that Jake had learned meant deep concentration. "I have reviewed the habitat dome. Specifications again," he said in his grinding voice. "The forest environment offers the most cover, but also the most places for ambush. The desert provides visibility, but little shelter. The ice field will slow movement, but might mask heat signatures. The swamp offers concealment, but limits escape routes." Jake ate his breakfast mechanically, his mind focused on what was coming. Around them, the dining hall buzzed with nervous conversation in dozens of languages. He noticed that several tables had empty seats where students had decided not to participate in the exercise. An hour after breakfast, all participating teams assembled in the preparation chamber adjacent to the habitat domes. Through reinforced windows, Jake could see the massive transparent spheres that contained different artificial environments. Each dome was easily 200 meters across and 50 meters high, large enough to contain complex terrain features. "Commander." Veltar stood before the assembled students, her 4 arms clasped behind her back. Her metallic skin seemed to reflect the chamber's lights more intensely than usual, and her glowing eyes surveyed the students with an expression Jake could not read. "Today you will face a challenge that has tested military students for over a century," she announced. "The Stalker exercise is not about winning or losing. It is about discovering what you are capable of when everything familiar is taken away." She gestured to a large display that showed the layout of the exercise protocol. "Each team will be assigned to a habitat dome. You will have 30 minutes to familiarize yourselves with the environment and establish initial positions. The Stalker will then be released into your dome. The display changed to show a countdown timer set to 6 hours. Your goal is simple survival for the duration. Teams may request emergency extraction at any time, but extraction will be considered a failure of the exercise. Medical teams are standing by for any serious injuries. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but it was not the panicked acceleration of fear. It was the steady, strong rhythm he remembered from challenging climbs or difficult hikes. His body was preparing for action, not flight. Team assignments are now being distributed, Commander Veltar continued. Report to your assigned preparation chambers immediately. Jake's team was assigned to Habitat Dome 3, which contained a dense forest environment. As they made their way through the corridors toward their preparation chamber, Jake noticed the different ways his teammates were handling the stress. Zethar moved with precise, calculated steps, his mind probably still running probability calculations. Lyra seemed to float rather than walk, her telepathic abilities making her hyper-aware of every emotional state around them. Nixa moved in short, quick bursts, stopping frequently to scan their surroundings. Thresh simply walked steadily forward, his crystalline structure ringing with each step. The preparation chamber was a small room with equipment, lockers, and a window that looked into their assigned dome. Jake pressed his face to the window and studied the environment they would soon enter. The forest looked remarkably similar to woods from Earth, with tall trees, dense undergrowth, and what appeared to be a small stream running through the center. The artificial lighting mimicked natural sunlight filtering through leaves, creating patches of bright and shadow that would provide both cover and concealment. It looks peaceful, Nixa observed, joining Jake at the window. Peaceful environments can be the most dangerous, Thresh replied, his harmonic tones carrying a note of warning. Predators use beauty to mask their presence. Jake studied the terrain with the eye of someone who had spent countless hours in similar environments on Earth. He identified potential hiding spots, natural pathways, and defensive positions. But he also looked for something his teammates probably would not consider: places where he could make a stand if necessary. The preparation chamber's communication system crackled to life. Team 7, you have 15 minutes to final equipment. Check and mental preparation. Entry to the Habitat Dome will commence at the signal. Jake's teammates began their final preparations. Zekthar checked his portable computing device and sensor equipment. Lyra sat in meditation position, apparently trying to calm her telepathic abilities. Nixa performed stretching exercises that made her look like she was preparing to take flight. Thresh tested the various tools and supplies he would carry for the team. Jake's preparation was different. He checked his modified plasma torch and made sure it was easily accessible. He filled his pockets with small rocks and metal fragments that could be thrown if needed. Most importantly, he spent time adjusting his mental state, preparing himself for what he planned to do. Jake, Zekthar said, his scales showing deep concern, you still have not explained your specific plan to us. If we are to work as a team, we need to understand your intentions. Jake looked at his friends, these alien beings who had accepted him and trusted him over the past weeks. They deserved honesty, even if his plan sounded insane to them. If we encounter the Stalker, he said slowly, I want you all to move to defensive positions, but do not run immediately. Give me 2 minutes to try something that goes against everything we have been taught about this exercise. What kind of something? Lyra asked, her mental voice tight with worry. I am going to treat it like any other predator from Earth. I am going to make it think I am more trouble than I am worth. Nixa's large eyes widened. You plan to confront it directly? That is suicide. Maybe, Jake admitted. But every predator from Earth can be discouraged if you convince it that you are not easy prey. They look for the path of least resistance. I want to become the path of most resistance. Thresh's crystalline form resonated with what sounded like surprise. You intend to make yourself appear to be another predator rather than prey. Exactly. The Stalker was designed to hunt prey animals. It probably has no programming for dealing with territorial disputes from other predators. The communication system crackled again. Team 7, prepare for dome entry. Exercise will commence in 30 seconds. Jake's teammates looked at him with expressions he could not fully read, but he sensed their mixture of concern and curiosity. They had agreed to trust him, and now he had to prove that trust was not misplaced. Remember, he said as they prepared to enter the dome, 2 minutes. If my approach does not work, then we run and follow your original plan. The chamber door slid open, revealing the forest environment beyond. Jake stepped through first, feeling the artificial breeze on his face and smelling the carefully recreated sense of an alien forest that reminded him of home. Behind them, the door sealed shut with a soft hiss. Somewhere in the Academy's control center, technicians were preparing to release a creature that had been designed to be the perfect hunter. The forest felt real under Jake's feet as he led his team deeper into the dome. The artificial environment was perfect, complete with the sounds of insects, the rustle of wind through leaves, and the distant babble of the stream. If he had not known better, Jake would have believed he was walking through a real forest on some distant world. 30 minutes until release, Zekthar whispered, checking his portable timer. His scales had settled into a mottled pattern of green and brown that helped him blend with the forest surroundings. Jake's team spread out, according to their planned formation. Nixai climbed into the lower branches of a large tree where she could serve as lookout. Lyra found a position near the stream where the sound of water would help mask any noise she might make. Thresh positioned himself behind a cluster of large rocks that would provide cover for the rest of the team. Zekthar set up his sensor equipment in a small clearing where he could monitor multiple approach routes. Jake chose a position that his teammates probably thought was crazy. Instead of hiding, he moved to the most open area he could find, a small meadow where the artificial sunlight created a natural spotlight. He wanted to be visible when the Stalker came. Jake, Lyra's mental voice touched his thoughts with worry. You are completely exposed there. The creature will see you immediately. That is the point, Jake replied quietly. I want it to see me. For the first 30 minutes, they waited in tense silence. Jake used the time to prepare mentally, thinking about every encounter his father had described with dangerous animals. Bears, mountain lions, wolves, even aggressive moose. The key was always the same: never show fear, never run unless you absolutely had to, and always make yourself appear more dangerous than you actually were. Around him, the forest sounds continued their natural rhythm. Jake found himself oddly calm, his breathing steady and his heart rate normal. This was just another predator, he told himself. A big one, a smart one, but still just an animal following its instincts. Release commencing, came the announcement through hidden speakers. Exercise is now active. Jake felt the change in the forest immediately. The artificial birds and insects fell silent, as if they somehow knew that death had entered their world. His teammates tensed in their positions, and he could feel Lyra's telepathic presence flutter with anxiety. For the first hour, nothing happened. Jake remained in his exposed position, while his teammates stayed hidden. Sekthar's sensors detected no unusual movement, and Nixa reported clear sight lines from her tree perch. Maybe it was released into a different section of the dome, Thresh suggested hopefully, his crystalline voice barely audible. No, Jake said softly. It is here. It is just being patient. He was right. During the second hour, Nixa spotted movement in the dense forest beyond the stream. Something large was moving through the undergrowth, but it was moving slowly, carefully, studying the terrain and the team's positions. I can see it, Nixa whispered from her tree. It is approximately 200 meters north of the stream, moving parallel to our position. It appears to be learning. Jake nodded. The stalker was doing exactly what any intelligent predator would do. It was studying its prey, looking for weaknesses, planning its approach. This was the behavior that made it so dangerous. It did not just attack. It hunted. It knows we are here, Zekthar reported, his sensors detecting heat signatures and movement patterns. But it is not approaching directly. It is circling, trying to identify our individual positions and capabilities. For another hour, the deadly game of cat and mouse continued. The stalker moved through the forest like a ghost, occasionally visible to Nix's sharp eyes, but always staying just out of clear sight. Jake could feel the tension building in his teammates as the creature's presence pressed against their nerves. "This is psychological warfare," Lyra said, her mental voice strained. "It is trying to make us panic, to force us into making mistakes." Jake remained in his exposed position, but he was no longer passive. He began to move around the meadow, not hiding or running, but marking territory like a predator would. He picked up rocks and threw them hard into the forest, where he suspected the stalker might be watching. He made noise, breaking branches and calling out challenges in a loud, clear voice. "Jake, what are you doing?" Zekthar hissed. "You are revealing our position." "It already knows where we are," Jake replied. "Now I am telling it that this is my territory." His teammates watched in amazement and horror as Jake began to behave in ways that went against every survival instinct they possessed. Instead of hiding, he made himself more visible. Instead of being quiet, he made noise. Instead of showing submission, he showed aggression. The change in the stalker's behavior was immediate. The creature stopped its patient circling and began to move more directly toward their position. But something was different about its approach. It was moving more cautiously, as if unsure what to make of prey that was acting like a predator. "It is coming," Nixa reported, her voice tight with fear, moving directly toward Jake's position. Estimated arrival in 3 minutes. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but it was not panic. It was the same feeling he got when facing down an aggressive dog or confronting a bear that had wandered too close to a campsite. His body was preparing for a confrontation, not a flight. "Remember," he told his teammates, 2 minutes. "Give me 2 minutes." The stalker emerged from the forest like a nightmare made real. It was even more terrifying in person than in the holographic displays. 8 feet of perfect killing machine. Its skin shifting colors to match the forest background, its bone blades extended and ready to strike. Its multiple eyes focused on Jake with predatory intelligence. Jake's teammates prepared to run, but Jake did something that shocked them all. He stepped forward, directly toward the creature. "Hey!" he shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing through the dome. "This is my territory. You want to hunt here, you go through me first." The stalker stopped, its head tilting in what looked like confusion. Its programming had prepared it for prey that ran, hid, or cowered in fear. It had no experience with prey that challenged it directly. Jake continued his advance, picking up rocks and hurling them at the creature with surprising accuracy. Each stone struck the stalker's hide with sharp cracks, not enough to hurt it, but enough to get its attention. "That is right, you ugly piece of bioengineering," Jake yelled. "You want a piece of me? Come and get it." The stalker's confusion was obvious. It took a step back, then forward, then back again. Its programming was conflicting with the reality of what it was experiencing. Prey was not supposed to behave this way. Jake pulled out his modified plasma torch and triggered it, creating a brilliant flash of light and a loud crackling sound. The stalker flinched away from the sudden sensory assault, its multiple eyes struggling to adjust to the brightness. "Yeah, that is what I thought," Jake continued, his voice full of confidence he did not entirely feel. big scary predator until someone fights back. You know what? I have dealt with worse than you back home. He began to advance again, making himself appear larger by raising his arms and continuing to make noise. The plasma torch flashed again, and he threw more rocks, each one finding its target on the creature's hide. The stalker's behavior became increasingly erratic. It would charge forward a few steps, then retreat when Jake stood his ground and shouted challenges. Its hunting instincts were telling it to attack, but its survival programming was warning it that this prey was behaving like a territorial predator. Jake, Lyra's mental voice was filled with amazement. It is confused. Its mind is conflicted. It does not understand what you are. Jake could see the conflict in the creature's body language. It was designed to be a perfect hunter, but perfect hunters avoided unnecessary risks. An injured predator was a dead predator, and Jake was presenting himself as something that would fight back hard enough to cause injury. For 10 minutes, the standoff continued. Jake kept up his aggressive display, never backing down, never showing fear. The stalker circled him warily, looking for an opening that never came. Every time it started to charge, Jake would create another flash of light, throw another rock, or shout another challenge. Finally, the creature made a decision that stunned everyone watching. It turned and walked away, disappearing back into the forest to look for easier prey. Jake stood in the meadow, breathing hard but victorious. Around him, his teammates emerged from their hiding places with expressions of pure amazement. That was impossible, Zekthar said, his voice full of wonder. No one has ever driven off a stalker through direct confrontation. How did you know it would work? Nixa asked, her large eyes wide with respect. Jake shrugged, feeling suddenly exhausted. I did not know, but every predator I have ever met respects strength and determination more than fear and submission. I just treated it like any other dangerous animal. For the remaining hours of the exercise, Jake's team not only survived, but thrived. They tracked the stalker's movements and helped warn other teams when it was approaching their positions. Jake's understanding of predator behavior proved invaluable in predicting where the creature would hunt next. When the exercise finally ended, Commander Veltar was waiting for them at the dome exit. Her expression was unreadable, but Jake noticed that her glowing eyes seemed brighter than usual.